Hello, everyone, and welcome to the History Bards podcast. This is your host, Michael Zucker, author of the Eisenhower Chronicles. We have another special guest for you today. Chris Tomasini is a historical fiction author, and his book is titled Close Your Eyes, A Fairy Tale. Thank you, Mr. Tomasini, for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm really grateful. Thank you.
So to start off, can you tell us about your journey as a writer and why you chose to write historical fiction?
Yeah, one thing that I've written about on my website and mentioned to people, but I think a lot of people don't quite realize this, is close your eyes. So I wrote, like all of us do, I wrote in my teens and in my 20s, and I was in undergrad and writing on the side and all that kind of thing. And in my 20s, I was really, I'm 51 now, I was really writing with intent. I was really convinced I was going to be a published famous author in the next year and all that kind of thing. Anyway, Close Your Eyes actually is not a new book. It's I wrote it circa 2000. I was writing it when I taught English in Poland and when I taught English as a second language in Japan. So this all dates back to roughly around 2000. I even workshopped it at the Humber College here in Canada, School of Creative Writing. But I have a previous book called Festival, and I had tried very hard to get that one published. And this dates back to the 90s. So we're talking about traditional print publishing, not many self-publishing options that I knew of anyway at the time. So I did the thing where you send off your manuscript in envelopes and you wait for months for an envelope to come back saying no and all that kind of thing. So Festival didn't get published. I had a few close calls, but I didn't find a publisher. Close Your Eyes, when I finished that, I tried again with traditional publishing to get that published. And when it didn't work out, I basically sat on it. So the book, quite literally, the manuscript, the paper manuscript, sat in a filing cabinet for a really long time until, and actually what happened, Michael, was I've been finishing, I'm halfway through a young adult trilogy. And what was on my mind was this not super experience I had trying to get published in the old days. And I thought to myself, you know what, that Close Your Eyes manuscript was really pretty darn decent. I should pull that out of the filing cabinet, self-publish it, which is so much easier these days. And I had actually self-published the Festival novel as well earlier. So my thinking was maybe if I get some good buzz regarding Close Your Eyes, that'll help me find an agent or a traditional publisher for the young adult trilogy. So that's actually what motivated me to pull Close Your Eyes out of the filing cabinet. But anyway, people like Dee, who did read the book and who reviewed it for the Historical Fiction Company, I don't think many of them realized the book had really been in a filing cabinet that long, and until I decided that I wanted to give it a second chance. So my journey as a writer, as far as that question goes, had this kind of gap where I went back to grad school and I got a job and a career and had kids. I'm a father and all that kind of thing. And then I've been working away at the young adult trilogy again. As far as why historical fiction, and I'm sorry I'm being long-winded, but historical, I mean, I think probably you're the same. You read nonfiction, you read history, and your brain is just whirling with, oh my God, that's fascinating. Like this little nugget here and this little nugget here, and what this gentleman did and what this person did. And when you marry that interest in reading historical fiction with a writer's brain, you're like, oh man, I should set some character like this in this time period, and this would be fascinating. So I think historical fiction, you read history and you become fascinated by that era or those eras, and you want to place your own characters there. So I think that's part of that.
Yeah, I think for me that my interest in history grew out of my interest in writing and storytelling, and then those two interests just instantly merged together, and
yeah,
the genre seemed like an obvious fit. I'm actually interested that you said that you taught English in both Poland and Japan. I don't know if there were other countries as well, but so that coupled with your sort of lifelong journey to become a writer, Would you say you have a special relationship with language?
Uh, well, I think I, I, I so teaching English was motivated by a desire to, like I was in my mid-20s. I wasn't ready to for a career in Toronto or in Canada here. I was ready. I felt like, and it proved out to be true. I felt like it was a perfect time to go see the world before you have a mortgage and before you have kids and all that kind of thing. So I really wanted to go see the world, and teaching English was a good way to do that. And that's what led to. So I had a few stops in England, and which is where my festival book, my first book, sprung out of. And in Poland was really just sheer chance. At the time, this was 96 or so. Before I mean, Canadians and probably Americans as well, it was hard for us to get jobs in Western Europe. They had, I think, like Germany or France had to prove there was no British person for a job before they'd hire a Canadian. So I was kind of limited to Eastern Europe, and I got a phone call from a Polish school, and they interviewed me for 5 minutes and said, "Okay, do you want to come?" And I said, "Well, I guess I'm going to Poland." So I went to Poland. But no, as far as the love of language goes, teaching was great and I enjoyed it. But I think the love of language is just from reading, because you grow up and you read whatever you read. You read Hardy Boys and you read comic books and all that kind of stuff. And at some point, you begin to read good writers and you read people whose language you love. And I mean, for me, I think of Cormac McCarthy and I think of
Hmm.
Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And I mean, Gabriel Garcia Marquez blew my doors off, that the 100 Years of Solitude book. So, no, I think the love of language comes from appreciating good writing, in my case, anyway.
I take it you were a fellow mourner of Cormac McCarthy in the last month or two when he passed.
Yeah, although to be honest, was it two books he had just released or two? It was two books
It
he had
was
just
two. It
released.
was Stella Maris, and I think that I pronounced that right, and The Passenger.
Yeah, from the reviews I read of them, they aren't high on my to-do list. I loved I mean the part two of the Borderland trilogy, the Crossing, is the one that made me weep. When the boy's back at home in Texas and his family's gone, and he's in that. If you remember this at all, and he's in that barn and it's raining and he's all alone. I remember just being in my actually, I was living in a basement apartment in Toronto, writing "Close Your Eyes," which has a lot of loneliness elements in it, and I remember weeping at the end of the Crossing. So yeah, Cormac McCarthy was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, after he passed, I stopped what I was doing and reread The Road, which took, it's not that long of a book, but I mean, that's, within my inner canon of favorites.
Yeah.
So can you tell us what Close Your Eyes is about and whether it's a fairy tale for children or adults?
Yeah. So Close Your Eyes is really hard to explain, or it's been hard for me to describe, having come back to it and reread it. And I tinkered with it a tiny little bit when I self-published it after it had been in the filing cabinet so long, but I didn't tinker with it very much. It was really pretty much good to go. So it's set in early 1400s Central Europe. So it's kind of set in a Czech, southwestern Poland sort of area. Um, it makes a lot of allusions to the church, the Catholic Church, and that era of Catholic control of most of Europe, and people like Jan Hus and Wycliffe beginning to struggle in a way that Martin Luther eventually would with the church. Joan of Arc has this kind of important but off to the side of the stage sort of presence in the book. She's kind of this figure that the main character Tycho kind of grapples with, because he's being told that he needs to live up to her by a couple characters, but yet he's not ready to do so and doesn't even know what his purpose in life would be. So you take this European historical background, and it's there. It kind of floats in the background of the story, but the story is actually a real set piece. It's this castle, a crazy a crazy a crazy king, mad king, a dwarf who's so there's and actually Michael, I don't know if you know this, but there's three narrative voices, which is another kind of unique thing about the book. So Sam the dwarf, is the main storyteller, the main historian, drawing all the threads together. What he's trying to do is tell the story of his friend Tycho, who's the main character, I would say. And Tycho had left behind a journal, so Sam incorporates some of these journal elements from Tycho into the book. And then there's another character who I just refer to as the bishop, Bishop Tonelli, who has come to this castle later in life, and he's the one whose voice hints at all this Martin Luther sort of angst regarding Catholicism and the papacy. So Samuel the dwarf also uses some of these letters from the bishop as well. So as far as what the book is about, there's this historical landscape in the background, which the characters make allusions to in Joan of Arc's presence, and the bishop talking about Jan Hus and Wycliffe, and the church trying to quiet their voices, and then you've got this group of characters, and I think as good reviews have come in over the last year or more, I think people have really found it to be a nice little family. I think there's a found family in this book where they care about each other. And Tycho struggles to know what to do about this girl he maybe does or does not love, and this quest he might have in life. I think that's the heartbeat of the story, and Sam trying to make sense of all this for himself. And there's a lot of discussion about love in the book, although it's not at all a love story. There's no boy and girl who really love each other, and it's more how is love lurking in the background of all this, and why is it leading this person to do this and this person to do this, and then I think the real love story is this family. It's this family love, this group of people who really enjoy each other's time together. So anyway, that's my shot, Michael, at explaining Close Your Eyes. It's a hard to describe one, but it's a sort of a not love story set in Central Europe in the 1400s.
So where you were in Poland teaching English, is that roughly where this takes place?
Yeah, in the book, I never actually speak the word Poland or really refer to a Polish town. And the castle Gora, there is a little town in Poland called Gora, and I stole that name, but it's not really set. It's not tangibly set in any certain place. But yeah, that landscape and the politics and the culture of it is very much Central Europe. I refer to the Hussites, the Czech rebels around that time. I refer to them a lot. So it's kind of mostly through them that you get an idea of, oh, this must be kind of the North Czech, southern Poland kind of region.
And I'm not sure if you said so. The book is a fairy tale. Is it more geared for a younger audience or a more mature audience?
So no, not a young audience at all. But another thing that's a genre, not I don't want to say it's genre bending, but anyway, a way that the book is slippery is that, and I think Dee would agree, there's some really nice literary language and feel to the book, but the characters are mostly in the late teen to 20 range. So today, in the 2023, there's this new adult genre of fiction, so like the 20 something genre of readers. Today you would kind of call it possibly a new adult reading level. So no, I wouldn't. It's definitely not for children. My 13-year-old, for example, I haven't wanted her to read it yet, and so it's anywhere from late teens and up. And the people I think who have really gravitated towards it have been that 20 something range.
Okay, so young adult to, I guess, actual like young adult.
Yeah, so yeah, I hadn't heard this term new adult myself until, I don't know, a little while ago, but it does seem to fit into that. They have this audience that they're calling the new adult audience, and that's the 20 something range. So it seems to fit in there pretty well.
Okay, yeah, I think this is the first that I've heard of that term either. It's interesting. So the novel is set in the early 1400s, you said?
Yeah, 1430 roughly, yeah.
Okay, so around when Gutenberg invents the printing press.
Yeah, although yeah, and yeah, Tycho has a Bible that he has carried around, the big hefty Bible that was given to him by one of the leaders of the Hussites. But no, there isn't much reference really to the printing or to books really. Ahab is this elder character in the castle who's a mentor and a scholar teacher type for the children, and he's dealing with scrolls, and but I don't think I actually refer to any actual Gutenberg books at all in the castle.
And so, I mean, it does reference to the church. I mean, obviously the 1400s is kind of like the shift from like the Middle Ages to like the beginning of what we would now call modern history. Is that history, whether, I mean, you made reference to Martin Luther a few times, even though this is before the Reformation. Does that book act as a sort of commentary on either the church or the dawn of modernity in this period?
Yeah, so yeah, Martin Luther is still just under 100 years away. But
Right.
you do have Jean Wycliffe in England and Jan Hus in the Czech Republic, roughly, who are kind of early predecessors of Martin Luther, questioning the church's power, questioning the church's teachings, church questioning that if you have the Bible and you have the written word, how did all this other power come from that the church is claiming it has, all that kind of thing. So, yeah, the bishop character in the book and his letters. So what the bishop has been exiled to this castle. He knew the Pope. He knew the Pope too well. The man who became the Pope in 1417. And he was kind of shushed out of Italy to Gora to get rid of him. And he's writing back to his former friend who exiled him, and very much voicing all this Jan Hus, John Wycliffe kind of stuff. And also there's some mentions of the Crusades and what really was the logic of the Crusades, sending all these people there to die, to massacre Muslims. What was that all about? So yeah, again, mostly, Michael, all this is historical landscape in the background of the actual story. I don't like Tycho doesn't go fight a crusade or anything like that, nor does Tycho really question the church. It's the bishop kind of alluding to all these things in the background of what's happening in the castle.
What were some other historical fiction novels or films or just other works of art that helped to inspire this book?
Um, yeah, I was thinking about that a while ago. Who I might have read, as far as fiction goes, who I might have read who would have inspired anything. The only person I can think of really, do you know a guy named John Banville, a British writer?
I don't
He's
think
got
so.
he's got a lot of books, but two of them, he's got one on Kepler. Kepler is an astronomer in the 1500s somewhere, and he's got one on Copernicus. So Copernicus is mid 1400s, I believe, and just that, well, medieval early Renaissance era, I think, really is in those books a lot, and those are the only ones I can think of that were really, oh, actually, Barry Unsworth has got morality play. I remember reading that, would have been roughly in this time too. So morality play by Unsworth is 1300s England. I think it's actually a murder mystery set with this troupe of morality play actors. That was actually a good book. But so for fiction, I can think of a few things, but I can't actually think of a lot that would have inspired this. But I did read. So I did an English specialist undergrad, but I did a minor in history, and I grabbed for this interview, Michael, a lot of geeky stuff that I read just for the hell of it, because I liked all this stuff. The Northern Crusades, Joan of Arc, and also another part of my history, Michael, is I spent a lot of time working in bookstores in Toronto in the 90s. And when you work in bookstores, as you may or may not know, you get a staff discount, but also you have there's all those remainder bins. And actually, the Joan of Arc one this book would have been $35 or something, and would have been on the remainder bin for $8.99, and I would have got my staff discount on top of that. So I remember buying a lot of stuff like this, just because it was there and I had access to it. So, and I read all these things. So I read a lot of medieval history, really because I was interested, and it was something I was very curious about. So I'm not going to specify any one of these that was seminal to Close Your Eyes, for example, but all this stuff together really kind of makes your brain swell up with this era at this time anyway for me.
Do you mind reading some of the titles and authors for the audio listeners?
Yeah, Joan of Arc by Mary Gordon, so a biography of Joan of Arc. The Northern Crusades by Eric Christensen. This is a book about when you think about the Crusades, you think about the Holy Land, but this is actually Northern Europe when they sent troops to Northern Europe to quell pagans in Northern Europe. So like the Lithuania, Northern Poland kind of area. Medieval Lives by Norman Cantor, who's also, I didn't bring it up. Norman Cantor also has another seminal medieval history book. I can't remember the title of it. Women in the Middle Ages by Gies, Gies. The Great Mortality by John Kelly. So those are the ones I just waved at the camera. So yeah, for the audio listeners, those were those ones.
How would you say you went about finding your characters' voices? I know you said it's been a number of years since you wrote the novel, but if you can remember that.
Well, I wonder how different they all are. So Tycho is 16 or 17 in the book. He's this scamp. He's a playful scamp. I'm not sure it's fair to say he's a womanizer because he barely knew what he was doing, but he was certainly with women. Sam is a 30-something dwarf, and when you're 30 in the Middle Ages, that's a lot older than 30 is today. So he's really feeling his years on his body and in his soul. And then the bishop, so the third narrative voice, the bishop is this exiled bishop from the Italy region who's been sent to kind of Central Europe to get rid of him. As far as finding their voices goes, no, I think I have to admit that they're all versions of myself. So the Chris who was completely perplexed by Catholicism in the medieval ages and how it really had that much power. I think the bishop was voicing that side of my brain. I think Tycho, the youthful Tycho, the scamp, is maybe me wishing I had been more like that when I was young, and probably Sam. I think Sam is the one who's the most me. So this very thoughtful, slowly exploring what is the truth that's lurking behind all this. Like, why did Tycho and Agnieszka flee the way that they did and risk death the way that they did, and why was Pavel the king? Why was he so insane after the death of his wife? And why myself, Sam, who's the loneliest character in the book probably? Why have I not been able to touch upon love? So I think they're all shades of me, to be honest, Michael. I wish I was a better writer to really channel some other voices, but I think they're all parts of me.
Well, would you say you prefer writing prose or dialogue?
Well, dialogue, I think so Close Your Eyes has it's not, it's so hard to describe. It's not a heavy, I've said it's kind of a literary book at this weird new adult audience level. And there's some really nice writing, and I think people have reviewed and said there's some really nice writing in the book. So there's these literary elements, but then there's this really sometimes really just playful, off the cuff banter dialogue, and it's fun. And I think that's where any humor in the book comes from, is from the dialogue, and characters teasing each other and that kind of thing. But then the prose elements are where when I flip through it, and I was flipping through it this afternoon, just in case I might read something. The prose elements are where there's some really touching, really touching language and thoughts. So I don't know if I have a preference for one over the other. I did actually write a play in undergrad, so I have actually written a play before, and it was produced at U of T back in my undergrad days. So I enjoy dialogue, but as far as one or the other, I don't know. The dialogue is where I've been fun, I think, in my writing, and prose is where I've been thoughtful, I think. So
Hmm.
that's my answer.
Do you have a favorite either line or passage from the book?
Yeah, so I I grabbed it and I was flipping through it, and there's parts that I um, like that are too long to read. Um, there's there's two paragraphs at the very end. One written by Tycho in Tycho's last letter back to the castle, and one by Sam as Sam closes the book. I thought I might read the part by Tycho. So anyway, I'm at this at this moment I'm wondering if I should explain a bit about what happens at the end or if that's too much of a giveaway. But anyway, so this is Tycho writing back to his friends at the castle a couple of years after his escape, after which they had had no news of him for a while. And he writes, I've said that I know nothing of love, yet that is not quite true. I know that love is the reason that Gnishka and Mikhail shall defy time. I know that it is the reason Pavel's last years were ones of misery. I know that love can be a blessing or a curse, and that this inherent gamble of loves is one that no one will refuse to play. For the alternative, as Sam and I can attest, is to be empty, to have a void in the center of your chest, to feel as though the greatest story of your life is plucked from your soul before it has a chance to be told. So there's passages like that that continue to make me pause and think about them again even after all these years.
That was a very nice bit of prose there. Um, as a kind of a final question, do you have any advice for sort of aspiring or rising historical fiction writers?
Um, yeah, I was thinking about this, and my answer is just to be a reader. And after that came into my mind, I was thinking, I feel like I've read that from some other writer before, but I can't, in the midst of time, remember who it might have been. But probably you and I are the same. You grew up reading whatever you read, and in my case, I was reading comic books and the Hardy Boys and God knows what else, and all these words coming into your head and your brain, and then you get into late high school when you're reading whatever you're reading then, Gatsby and Hemingway, in my case, and then you get into this kind of weird medieval history that I was reading for a while in my 20s. So I think you start off as a reader, and you just kind of your brain fills up with information, and some of it is of no use to you at all, and some of it you think, oh my god, this would be a great book to put this guy in this place at this time. And yeah, so my advice would just be to read voraciously and read everything.
Do you have any either events or book signings coming up that you'd like our readers to know about, or listeners to know about?
Yeah, no, not any new events. I went to a September book fair here in Ontario last September, and I'm thinking about doing that again, but I'm not quite sure if I'll do that. No, the young adult trilogy I've been working on, book one is done, and I've been holding off self-publishing that because I would really honestly rather have a traditional publisher for this series and have the treatment from a traditional publisher. So I've been holding off on self-publishing book one, hoping that I can find an agent or a publisher to take on the series. And I've been writing book two. So there will be teasers here and there as I try to promote or tease people with what the trilogy will be about. But I don't have any signings coming up now.
Okay. Do you have anything else that you want to include or discuss, or are you ready to close?
Well, I was thinking about quotes from different authors and quotes about writing. And the one that I have always liked, actually, there's kind of two, but the one that came to mind first was, do you know the line from Salinger where J.D. Salinger, where he says something like, uh, just think about the book you would most want to read as a reader, and then just go ahead and write that book yourself. I've always enjoyed that line. So kind of a, don't worry about what is popular. Don't worry about what other people are writing. Write what matters to you. Write what you would find important. So I've always thought that was a good thing to live by as a writer. And the other note that I've always remembered about life in the writing business is someone like one of the early pulp fiction writers, like Dashiell Hammett or Chandler or James Cain, one of those guys. I can't remember who it was. Wallpapered his apartment with his rejection letters. So this is, again, this is like the 30s or sometime. This is the era when you got real physical letters back from publishers. And he wallpapered his entire apartment with rejection letters. And I've always thought, wow, so that's how hard it is. So you just keep trying, and yes, you're going to get rejected. And I'm not sure if it's the same for people these days, but I remember in the 90s when I was trying to get Festival published, I got all those paper. I still got them in a folder. I got all those. I think in email it's less effective, but in the physical ones, they come in and you here's another one. Okay, then now I try this publisher, and you keep working your way along. So anyway, just the perseverance, I think, is from Hammett or Cain or whoever that was. I think the perseverance comes through in that anecdote about that writer. So yeah, those are my two thoughts about writing advice or quotes or wisdom that I have always thought of.
Yeah, I think the Salinger one reminds me of something that Toni Morrison said that was very similar to that, about that you have to think about the book that you would want to read and then you must write it. Or if it doesn't exist, you must write it.
Oh yeah, that's very similar, yeah.
Right, so thank you, Mr. Tomasini, for speaking with us today, and thank you to our listeners for joining us. We will see you next week with another historical fiction author. Keep making history and keep on listening. And